Hi.
Hi. Welcome back to the Tokyo UX 2022. Thank you for deciding to participate this event with us. I'm Yoko Kadono, supporting this event as an intern. We would like to start American Vision part by now. And before we start, I want you to know that this is all recorded for the archive viewer. And if you have any questions, please type in your comment in the Q&A tab you can find below the screen. We have the Q&A session after the speech, and the speaker will happily answer to your question. And any kind of questions are very welcome. Let's get started with first speaker. The first speaker would be Zosia-san. Hi, Zosia-san. Hi. Zosia-san is a UX researcher who pivoted to the field of UX from working as a socialization therapist with autistic clients. The theme of this speech is deep insights from customer interviews. Are you ready?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then please start.
Go ahead and share. And here we go. I'm just opening up to a nice view of Tokyo. In order to take a moment to thank you to the organizers of Tokyo X and take a special side thank you to Yoko, who worked directly with me in setting this all up and everything. So thank you. And here I am today. I'm here to talk about my work with people who have autism and how it's impacted my approach as a UX researcher. I'm specifically going to highlight user interviews today because there's a distinct challenge to user interviews. The best outcome depends on building connection so that your interviewees can communicate openly and provide you with more potent insights. So I'm going to start here with a clinical definition of autism. It's a neurological and developmental disorder that affects interaction, communication, learning, and behavior. The takeaway I'd like you to have here is that it heavily impacts the social domain. Now, what is the link between my behavioral work and UX research? Both build upon enhancing interpersonal engagement and communication to reach a stronger understanding. In this talk, I will be presenting you with the issues and scenarios I encountered with my experience working with people who have autism, my behavioral work. A summary of what I noticed will appear in these screen boxes. And from there, I will pivot to how I apply this experience to my UX research practice. These suggestions appear highlighted in yellow. The suggestions I make do clearly apply to people who have autism, but I believe these suggestions can be used to strengthen your connection to all users that you interview. Basically, my behavioral work means that I work hard to maintain social engagement. Interviews are building this engagement at a hyper speed or not natural speed because you're posed with someone that you don't know, they don't know you. And even when you review what you are going to do, they don't know how it's going to happen, how it's going to go through, what questions you're going to ask. Just similarly, I'm prepared for this talk, but I don't know what's going to happen at the end. It's not always possible to apply these approaches. This talk then is just ultimately more about thinking deeper about your interactions with users. I will cover how conducting and analyzing interviews, how building, conducting, and analyzing interviews has been impacted by my behavioral work. These are some considerations I think about in building the interview guide that have been shaped by my work, behavioral work. Now I start with clarity. Questions in my experience, questions need reframing until full clarity is reached and metaphors are not understood. I can get a random fact thrown into conversation and say X car can go X miles per hour. At this point, I'll want to point out the interjection to the conversation because this diversion indicates the conversation has shifted from a shared experience to one-sided. So in the moment, I might say, why are you telling me about this? And the answer I might get is, I found it on the internet. My question needs more clarity, and I will reframe it. So in practice, review each question for clarity and the true meaning that each question conveys. Be direct and jump straight to the question. We have sometimes there's a question that uses the magic wand. I prefer to just ask people what they would change. So I'm going to talk about clarity a little bit further and saying that it's a bit of a double-edged sword because it's important that the user understands you, but you need to ultimately understand the user. That is why you're doing the interview. So you need to know what information you need. Each question should be directed at meaningful information. In my behavioral work, I worked under a limited time constraint to maintain attention and remain in a shared interaction. As researchers, we have a limited time with each participant and need to use it fully. I work to dig deeper to get the information I may simply want. I need to get at the why and what it'll ultimately provide. In UX, we work with many Mad Libs, so I've created my own to help me build full clarity in my questions. And it goes, I want to know blank so that I can blank, so I can learn blank in order to blank, with emphasis on the in order to. Let's say I want to know about a user's job, so I can learn about their work in order to what? Am I asking this as a standard question? This might be where I want to start, but I need to project what about their job is important to understanding how they interact with the product. You may consider this narrow, but if you're working on a financial product, and the person you're interviewing tells you their job is training dogs, but this person makes most of their money as an Uber driver, you're missing some potentially key insights by not asking them where their income comes from, rather than just relying on the question of their line of work. And moving on to context, take this chart presented to Congress in a debate over Planned Parenthood funding. What we see, abortions on the rise, and cancer screenings taking a dive. Add the context with the y-axis, you have the same statements are true, but you get a much different picture. Flipping plus. Okay, here we go. And so being aware of the before, after, and background gives necessary context to what happened. So Someone I work with was quite athletic and competed in the Special Olympics. I had talked to his mother and who said it went well. So I went into the situation all excited, asked how it went. However, he gave me a simple answer like okay or fine and did not particularly seem happy. So I probed further and I asked to see his medals because he had been competing well. He said he had none. Felt that a kind of awkward moment, but at this point, his mother was nearby and piped in asking him to tell me why he didn't have any medals. He threw them away because it's very competitive and did not get gold and got silver. So at this point, I'm obviously missing the context and background to what happened without digging deeper into the event. And if his mom had not piped in, I would have a much different picture. When we interview, we do not have other people chiming in. We need to explore what factors surround the matter in question. Otherwise, we'll be addressing the wrong user needs. So explore the user journey beyond known touch points to see the full product experience and setting. In point of view, the parent's account actually most always is completely different from the child's account. But it's typical for different stories to have different accounts. And no man is an island. We need to acknowledge and explore how users intersect or we miss opportunities. Take AirTags, the case of AirTags. Parents commonly use them to track their kids, but the software is designed to give location to one user. And in most of the population, there is more than one caregiver, thus resulting in abandonment of what was a great opportunity. You might note that the AirTag was meant to track items, but people also share items. One car can have more than one driver, for instance. In this case, the user journey was in fact several user journeys that overlap might have given this opportunity. Users need to be considered in multiple layers to see the full impact of the product. Use does not affect one user at a time. These are some considerations I have thought about in conducting interviews, especially from my impact from my behavioral work. Starting with setting, in my behavioral work, heightened senses and environmental, being sensitive to the environment makes environmental control very important to people who have autism. In practice, in terms of comfort, we're not entirely devoid of this comfort bias. Consider the home team advantage. In practice, I would consider conducting interviews in a comfort zone. You'll learn more about the person too. Speaking more specifically on this, I would say Zoom is not the enemy. After COVID, people are accustomed to it. It provides home team comfort, and you can learn more about the person. If I pick on me for a little bit, I do have a virtual screen, so you might say that it doesn't tell you that much about me. But you can tell that I made it and set it up, so I tend to have fun with the details, or I'm serious about the details, whichever way you want to see it. But I also suggest giving the gift of choice in a setting. Move beyond the office if you can, and then see what does their setting choice tell you about them. Like if you choose to meet in a coffee house, let them choose which one in a certain area, or let them choose which one. And do they choose Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, or the local coffee house? All right, here note taking. Imagine you're sitting back on a therapist's couch, pouring your heart out. Suddenly, the therapist starts writing notes furiously. What is he writing? This becomes a problem. You lose focus and feel insecure. We are introducing judgment and power dynamics to the situation. We need to think of what we're telling people when we take notes. The comfortable conversational tone displays a change and presents a question of the power dynamics because one person is reporting what the other person is saying rather than a comfortable back and forth. And the interviewee will feel judgment on what they say and may become more conscious of what they're saying. Whether they care or not, it is apparent. In my experience, I will have a devastating disruption even to a sip of water. I suggest to refrain from note taking if you're recording and leave it to debriefing afterwards and immediately instead. However, note taking can be a tool to use as a silent cue to the user that you would like to hear more about what they're talking about. As for people present, and for people with autism, interacting with more than one person can be overwhelming and unmanageable. So I would like to take the case study of the buddy system. Let's explore the psychology of it. It provides protection to the pair while providing intimidating friend, 2-to-1. We are brought up from childhood not to walk alone, go with a buddy. Police officers are a prime example of this. They go into dangerous situations, so they immediately have a partner with them for backup. I would suggest trying to interview one-on-one, especially for more sensitive topics or users. However, I do note an exception to stakeholders or people who are used to larger audience. And I'd like to make a note on following up. Your user feedback doesn't necessarily have to end once they leave the center stage of your interview. In my experience, thoughts can linger and need to be expressed. I may hear about that car that person mentioned a week later. So your users are not necessarily close-ended on their thoughts on the product once they leave. I would suggest giving them a way to contact you if they have something to add for voluntary follow-up. Now, these are some considerations I think about in my interview analysis that have been shaped by my behavioral work. Let's take a look at speech. Take a look at this video. Yeah, I don't have any sound. Let's consider this phone call. I imagine the transcript is very different without making note of the emotion expressed. Written language exists with exclamation marks and now emojis. Transcripts cannot be devoid of emotional intonation, can they? TV's captions will even note suspenseful music. I would take note of changes in tone and facial expression that reflect emotion. And yeah, because in my experience, I actually do not, I have rather extreme notations of these, but this works for me with user interviews. And moving on to body language, it's really a further extension of your tone, but in facial expressions, you'll notice behavior of emotion on a micro level and the macro level of comfort, which is important to you in gauging how your interaction is going. will be seen on a macro level in their body language specifically. And I would say that however you choose to implement emotional emphasis that was noted, make sure to do so before parsing the data or it'll get lost. I remember being in a workshop discussion where someone was discussing a bit of a transcript that they had of the person they had interviewed, and they said, oh yeah, this person got really excited and got really enthusiastic about this certain point, but it was not readily apparent in the transcript, and we needed the person to know it. So finally, I would say to take a note on listening for what's not said. In my experience, a detailed account can exclude the people present. I can hear about a trip to Utah, noting times, colors, schedule, other details without the mention of people. Sometimes it's overlooked, what is overlooked that's important to your project. In one project, we started the interview with a word association, cybersecurity. These specialists associated the term with growing and evolving threats automatically, not protocol or a solution that they rely on. This actually highlighted a specific need and for this subset of users, because remember the word was cybersecurity, not cyber threat. So when an account bypasses an expected process or concept, I would suggest to explore it when you get a chance, or explore it further. And that is it. Thank you for joining me. These are my thoughts and my experiences. What are yours? Question and answer time. And here, even though I have it on my background, is my LinkedIn. If you would like to connect and directly ask me any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Zosia. So does anyone have questions? Okay, then can I ask one thing?
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
You mentioned about the body language.
Yes.
And I found that personally, I found that body language differs a lot depending on their country or culture they have.
That is true.
Yeah. So, for example, like crossing legs were quite common in the US, I think, but back in Japan, we see the person who's crossing their legs kind of a little bit bossy or sometimes offensive, kind of. So I never had my legs crossed in any formal interviews, of course. So do you see those difference as well, depending on their background? Like, do you have any?
I have actually I haven't had cross-cultural experience working with people, but that would be, I've just worked in America.
Okay.
So I've been worked on in global projects. That is something though to definitely go into an interview knowing when you're people of different cultures, be aware of the different things. Like you say. But that is a very good and very important point, because I say that you should be aware of body language, but you should learn a bit about what body language means before you go in and reference it, rather than, because some people just work on a gut feeling, and sometimes that gut feeling isn't correct.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to note that we are expecting a lot of archive viewers afterwards. So you may receive Q&As after this speech. So would that be okay with you? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
a big part of this is that this talk is about generating discussion and talking further about how we can empathize and further closely connect with our interviewers on
mhm.
this faster pace.
Okay. So
Love to hear from
thank you
other.
very much. Yeah. So
Okay,
thank you very much for your speech today. It was so pleasure to have you.
thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna have a short break for 15 minutes, and we will move on to the next speaker. As it you of course, Zosia-san, you can join after as a viewer.
Of course, and thank you again.
Thank you.